This is Talk Easy. I'm Sam Fragoso. Welcome to the show.
Senator Warren, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We have not met before.
No.
But it is an absolute thrill to have you here in New York City. I heard that you sometimes wake up in the morning around 3 a.m.
Uh-huh.
And when you do, you have a thing that's top of mind
Right.
that comes to you.
Right.
A pressing issue.
Right.
I imagine since Donald Trump was elected for a second term, you are not alone in these 3 a.m. panic wake-ups.
Yep.
But since I'm here with you today,
Mm-hmm.
what happened this morning? What was top of mind?
So the first thing this morning was, is he going to obey the court order? That just like what popped into my mind, and it was 3:02 when I rolled over and looked at the clock. And I'm worried about every part of what's happening in our country right now. And that one sounds so abstract, but for me, it just instantly clicks to, if he breaks this country, if he breaks sort of our, three parts of government, the legislature writes the laws, the executive administers those laws, and the courts enforce to make sure everybody's followed those laws. If he breaks that, it means for lots of families, for good families, for people who work hard and play by the rules, the implications move to things like grandma doesn't get her Social Security check, and the family can't get a mortgage, or they need to sell their house.
You've talked about schools expanding their class size.
Schools, that's exactly right. They're going after the Department of Education. I'm sorry, I'm already worked up, 45 seconds in. The Department of Education. And it means what they want to do is basically cut so that class sizes get bigger. Little kids with serious disabilities don't get the aid that they needed so they can be in a classroom along with the other kids. It means the after-school programs are gone. And all of those things touch people's lives in not just everyday ways, but can literally mean the difference between whether you can make it to the end of the month or not.
Well, my father has been a public school teacher in Chicago for
God bless.
30 years.
God bless.
I know your first job was, I believe, in New Jersey as a special needs teacher. You did that for about a year. Now, you woke up at 3:02 this morning with that thought. How do you fall back asleep?
So I do two things. The first one I do is I force myself, get up and go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Get a drink of water, right?
And is your husband at this point
sound asleep?
Profoundly annoyed by this?
No, he's asleep.
Okay.
He lets me do this, doesn't engage on this. I get back in bed and I do two things. The first thing I do is I say, is there something I can do about this? And there always is. There's something. I can call somebody in the morning. I know. I can see if I can get this group. I know. I'm going to talk to some public school teachers tomorrow and get them in the fight. I've got a thing going now called Save Our Schools. And it's to try to get more people from all around the country to lift up their stories about why they support public schools, why they are in this fight all the way. So is there something, just one thing I can do that brings my anxiety level down a little? And then I put my earbuds in and I flick on a book I've already read. It has to be something I've already read, and it does not have super exciting parts in it. And I put it in my ear, and I go back to sleep sometimes.
So the top of mind issue today, and it is one that is on the front page of the New York Times this morning, is that as of right now, the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, U.S. citizen, currently sitting in a prison in El Salvador, has not been brought back to this country. The administration has called it an administrative error, while the Trump team continues to ignore Supreme Court's instructions to facilitate his return. The Atlantic published a recent article claiming the constitutional crisis is here. So I want to know, has anyone in the legislative branch developed what to do if and when the Trump administration formally tells the Supreme Court that they're not going to comply with their instructions?
Right. So
when Trump asks the justices, 3 of whom he's installed, to bend the knee. What is the plan then?
So this is what I was thinking about at 3:02 this morning. What if he just says no?
Yeah.
We are literally then in full-blown constitutional crisis. Now, look, we've been inching toward constitutional crisis all along. When you've got a president who just doesn't care what the law is, when he's openly saying he doesn't want to obey the Constitution. But let me start with Con Law 101. And that is, remember, legislature makes the laws. The administration is supposed to administer those laws. The court is supposed to enforce those.
When was the last time you watched that YouTube video of I Am a Bill?
Yeah, I Am a Bill. Do you love that? You know, he dances
incredible.
up and down the steps. You know, it's the whole heart. But all of that actually rests on something else. And that is people all across this country. So I'm not ready to give up on the Constitution. I'm not ready to say that the president has broken the whole thing. But ultimately, the power is less about Congress and more about 300 million people across this country who are going to have to be in the fight to save our country, to save our Constitution, to save our democracy. And ultimately, that's not just an abstraction. It's really to save our public schools, to save access to health care, to save your grandma's Social Security, that those are the things we're going to have to be in the fight for. So what are we trying to do in Congress? Fair question. But it's not our end of how a bill becomes a law is not how we enforce it. That's the other end of the 3 parts.
You said it's a fair question, but I don't hear the answer to that.
That's because the answer lies at the other end. It lies at the courts and not at the legislature.
So let's talk about the courts. And I think we're in agreement that Trump is inching towards calling the court and its findings and its directions illegitimate.
Yeah.
Right? But I want to go back because language, I think, is important here. When the court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, you immediately went on ABC and said the court, quote, has burned whatever legitimacy they may have still had. They just took the last of it and set a torch to it. 2 years before that, you called the nomination and confirmation of Justice Amy Coney Barrett a corrupt and illegitimate process. In that time, Gallup has reported that only 35% of Americans express confidence in the U.S. judicial system, marking a 24-point dip since 2020. So, do you think calling the Supreme Court illegitimate, as burned down and torched, is an effective way to get voters to trust the system, to trust the courts? Like, what is your aim in using that kind of vivid, apocalyptic language?
Look, I don't think that people should trust the court. Understand where we are right now.
But you want the court to do something
yes,
right now.
I do want them to earn the trust of the American people.
Earn it back.
They don't get it automatically because they all have cool robes. They get it based on what they do.
Okay.
So let's do all the parts here. What the Supreme Court needs to do right now is to say clearly and with one voice, no, Mr. President, you're the one who has to back down.
You want them to rise to the occasion.
That's right. I want them to rise to the occasion. And this is why I keep underscoring, no, we're not going to fix this elsewhere. Damn it, court, do your job. You got to turn the heat up under the court. And that is part of what I'm trying to do right now. But let me do the other half, and that is what we need to be doing in Congress.
Okay.
I want to turn the heat up under every damn one of these Republicans. Look, a handful of Republicans could stand up and say, Mr. President, no, you can't do this. No more. You don't get to create chaos through declaring an emergency. You don't get to do it in the courts. You don't get to do it on tariffs. You don't get to do this. We actually, over here in Congress, not only have the law on our side, we actually have spines. And we can stand up and say no to the president. We got 47 Democrats ready to do that. A handful of Republicans, and everything that's happening right now in Washington changes.
You have 53 Republicans in the Senate.
That's right.
Who do you think can stand up?
Look, they're not going to do this one at a time. I get this.
Well, they
it's
go in
going to
unison?
take a group.
They all got to jump in the pool?
Not all 53 of them.
How many?
But a handful.
Like
we just
4 to
need
5.
a few. 4 or 5, and you're already at the majority here.
Who are you thinking here?
Look, I don't know who's going to show signs of a backbone, and I say that
I love to see you smile
sincerely,
come out,
Sam,
though.
because all of them should. Look, these are people
Come
who
on,
walk.
we know
oh,
that
come
all
on.
of them should. Of course.
Yes, but damn it, these are people who walk around with a copy of the Constitution in their coat pockets, and they want to talk about rule of law and how important rule of law is and how they speak of the Constitution every morning and every evening over dinner. Then, by golly, stand up and do your constitutional duty.
Does the Senate have a cafeteria? Does that happen?
Not
do you guys
really.
ever, you guys all eat together sometimes?
Around
the water cooler?
We have a dining room.
Dining room.
Our equivalent of the water cooler is when we vote.
Right.
You actually have to go to the floor to vote.
Right.
And sometimes
And so when you deliver this
Yes.
face-to-face to some of the Republicans we're thinking about,
Right.
they say what?
Nothing. No eye contact.
No eye contact.
No eye contact.
They're afraid of your eyes.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
But you have such nice eyes.
I know.
Really
I know.
sad.
But they are.
So they look down at their feet?
Yep.
Like an awkward
Little
teenage boy?
sideways. We do the same thing in the elevators.
Really?
Yeah. You
Straight
get on
ahead?
the elevator. You get on the elevator. I do this. And I will actually say, I cannot believe that Donald Trump just said X or did Y. And there will be 3 Republicans, tiny little elevators. We're all crammed in and we've got our folks with them. And it's straight ahead. I do not see you here.
Really?
Yep.
And you can't break through? You've been there for 12 years.
Yep.
You can't break through to any of them.
Not yet.
So then tell me, with 53 Republicans in the Senate, 47 Democrats in the
Right.
Senate, in the House, Republicans,
Right.
218,
Right.
Democrats,
Right.
215. You know these numbers.
I know these numbers. God, do I know these numbers. They're like burned on the backs of my eyelids, Sam.
I understand.
Come on, just remind me again. Tell me again.
Look, we're usually we wait till the third act to get into trauma,
exactly.
but
Jeez.
we're right
Okay.
here.
Right.
Look,
Just right out in front.
you came in hot. I'm
I
matching
didn't.
you.
You have the numbers here. Okay.
What power do you foresee Congress wielding to stop or impede Trump's agenda? And why would a Republican-led House and Senate work to undermine his second term?
We don't have as much power as we want. I want the power of majority. I want
Right.
the power of 51. Not having as much power as we want is not the same as having no power.
Okay.
So, what have we done? Over what kind of fights have we been in? One is, a job you have in the United States Senate is oversight. Man, I keep sending out letters. I send out letters to people in the Trump administration. I send out letters to other people who have power.
You sent out a letter last week to the head of SEC.
That's right. And by golly, got an investigation. On Department of Education, they have certain statutory duties. They're trying to fire everybody. I get an independent investigator to come in and say, can you still meet your statutory authorities? And the importance of that is threefold. One, it reminds everybody in the agency, in the SEC, in the Department of Education, it reminds them, hey, you still have a job to do. Do your job. You are not here to just take a knee to Donald Trump. You're here to do your job. The second effect is that I pull in other Democrats with me. And that's important. And frankly, do it in front of a lot of Republicans. So we do this so I can bring it up at hearings. We can talk about it in other places where there are Republicans. Damn it, so I can keep talking about it on the elevator, right? So I can hand these letters out and say, help me in this with the Republicans. Read this, help me. And the third is because it helps on the outside. You get this investigation, you get these facts. There are folks right now who are suing the Department of Education. An independent federal investigation may yield information that could be very valuable in that. So you pick up the tools you've got and you use those tools as sharply and as vigorously and as often as possible.
People on the right, voters, pundits, commentators, have argued that Trump has a kind of genius that us pedestrians just can't see. Here are some exact quotes from commentators on Fox and Newsmax. When it comes to the war on Ukraine, Zelensky is playing checkers and Trump is playing chess. When it comes to tariffs, one commentator said that his tariff strategy is actually Trump's 3D chess moves. The measles outbreak, plane crashes, is actually Trump's 4D chess. And then finally, to top off the board game compliments, one Fox commentator has said President Trump is playing 5D chess with the economy, inventing a new dimension that is Donald. So I want to know, what are they seeing that perhaps you are not?
I think they are in the fable of all the people who stood by and watched the emperor parade down the street naked. Don't you remember the one
January
until
6th?
the little boy stands up and says, the emperor has no clothes?
I do remember that one.
You remember that one? You remember that one? Look, they can create whatever alternative reality they want. And reality does have a way of coming back in and asserting itself. People not getting their Social Security checks, I don't care what 5D you want to describe. They're not getting their damn Social Security checks. You're going to hear from them. Class sizes start going up in our public schools. We're going to hear from them. Half of the people in nursing homes right now are supported by Medicaid, and the Republicans in Congress are looking to cut it. Half the babies in this country get their health care through Medicaid, and the Republicans want to cut it. Veterans services, and the Republicans want to cut it. You know, I go through the list of what the Republicans want to cut, and there's not going to be a family left in America that's not going to feel that cut. And if I do my job and the rest of the Democrats do our job, there's not going to be a family left in America that doesn't know exactly whose fault this is. And it's Donald Trump and a bunch of spineless Republicans in Congress. And let me just say, all toward one purpose, and that is to do tax cuts for a handful of billionaires. Why are they trying to make all these other cuts in government? They want to make these cuts in government so that a handful of billionaires can run this country and basically not have to pay any taxes doing it.
Billionaires are not why he won Michigan, and they're not why he won Pennsylvania. It's not why he won Wisconsin. Almost every county in the U.S., there's been a rightward shift towards Trump in this past election, even in liberal cities, actually especially in liberal cities. Your home state of Oklahoma, born and raised, proud, 77 counties, not a one voted for Joe Biden. So I understand the fallout of these policies will likely be on the burdens and on the backs of the middle class, but it is the middle class that delivered him here. And so do you think people who voted for him are masochists, or is there something so profoundly unappealing about the Democratic Party that they would rather vote for someone that does not have their best interests at heart?
Come on, Sam. Remember the campaign. What was Donald Trump's
to, but I remember it.
Number one promise? What he promised over and over and over and over and over is, I will lower your costs on day one. Those were his words.
Yes.
On day one. Over and over and over. After he got elected, his very first interview, he said, "Why did you win, Donald Trump?" And he said, "Because I promised to lower people's costs." And now here we are in the third month. And when he's told, you know, the stuff you're doing around tariffs could actually raise people's costs, he said he couldn't care less. Those are his words. So he has gone from a promise to the American people that was very appealing in 77 counties in Oklahoma, very appealing to young people who look out there and say, I don't know when I'm ever going to be able to buy a home, very appealing to seniors who say, I'm worried about my costs going up. And then he is weeks into his presidency before he has exactly turned that on its head, and he is driving up costs for American families. So I see this as a giant bait and switch.
Okay.
He told people one thing, got elected on that one thing, and now he's headed in exactly the opposite direction.
But those people have not turned on him.
I don't know. I'm smelling the milk souring here. I'm seeing more seniors showing up.
Now hold on. I showered this morning.
I'm just saying in that area. But I'm serious. I watch people now over Social Security who say, whoa, that's not what I signed up for. You know, look at right now, all the lights that are flashing red for working families. So right now in America, people have more credit card debt delinquencies than they did right after the 2008 crash, more auto loan delinquencies, and consumer confidence has just collapsed in America. It's the lowest numbers ever. People are saying two things. They expect prices to go up. They're saying inflation they anticipate is going to be around 6.4%. And they're saying they're worried they're going to lose their jobs. And the reason that's so important, Sam, is it's important for two reasons. Consumers are they're like canaries in the coal mine. They're watching it firsthand. Fancy people read the charts and the numbers once they come out. But families are living this one at a time, and they're watching what Donald Trump is doing start to affect their lives. But the second is the American consumer is the horse that pulls the cart economically in our country and really the whole world. When consumer confidence falls, when people think I may not have a job, when they see, God, this is how much credit card debt I've got, more credit card debt than savings in America right now, the consequence is people start to pull back. And they start to pull back, that starts echoing backwards through the economy. So I think there are a lot of folks who are starting to live what Donald Trump's I couldn't care less about their lives. And I think that's going to be powerfully important.
Right next to Donald Trump is a man that you've called an unelected billionaire now serving as the co-president, and Elon Musk. Just this week, you introduced the SEER Act, which is designed to strengthen transparency and ethics requirements for special government employees like Musk. Now, I think increasing transparency is a very good idea. And I wouldn't trust Elon Musk with just about anything.
I'm trying to finish that sentence for you and thinking,
almost nothing.
Almost nothing.
But many Republicans voted Donald Trump not in spite of Elon Musk's presence, but because of it. Do you think Elon was able to have an outsized role in Trump's campaign beyond the interference he ran on Twitter, which is clear? Because we have not passed significant campaign finance reform.
Oh, yes.
Why was eliminating super PACs not something you wanted to do in 2021 when the Democrats had the House and the Senate?
Oh, it is something I've wanted to do for a long, long time. Yes, we need campaign finance reform. Indeed, if you had to pick two words for the Trump administration and Elon, one would be chaos, and the other would be corruption. And it's the corruption of spending $1/3 of $1 billion to get somebody elected president of the United States. It's the corruption of being the guy. Are you ready for this? Did you know that Elon Musk makes $8 million a day just off his federal contracts? And what he wants to do is cut access to Social Security for people who make an average of $65 a day.
I read your act and I read the statement.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You know the show. You know I do a lot of reading.
I know you do. But I just got to say it again because it's like, if this doesn't make us get in the fight, I mean, this is it. This is the moment. We are at a moment in history here where this is about turning our country over to a king and a handful of noblemen formerly known as billionaires.
So in 2021,
and they get to run the whole damn thing.
Tell me why in 2021, when you had the power, it wasn't top of mind.
I don't think I would describe it as not top of mind.
Well, I would describe it as not being present.
We didn't. I am there to fight this fight.
Okay.
We fight on the front foot on this. It is something we have got to get done. But look,
by we you mean you, not the entirety of the Democratic Party. You have senators in your party, right?
Fair enough.
I mean, you yourself, you had opposed super PAC money for a long time.
Yep.
Then in February of 2020, less than a month before you dropped out, you accepted $14.6 million in super PAC money from a woman named Carla Jurvetson, whose philanthropy is in part funded by her ex-husband, Stephen Jurvetson, who is a billionaire who is still on the board of SpaceX and was an early investor in Elon Musk's Tesla.
Yep.
This is the money that was funneled into your campaign. What does it say about our political climate that someone as smart and thoughtful and outspoken on this subject as you still had to take, not had to, but did take money?
Yeah.
What does that say?
Look, what you're talking about is how the whole system has become corrupted.
And
Money,
you feel like you're part of that corruption then?
look, I feel like we live in a world right now where money keeps pushing every part of what happens. Do you think Donald Trump would be president if Elon Musk hadn't put $1/3 billion into his campaign?
I don't think he would have won in the fashion that he did.
Yeah. And you put that with he promised on day one that he was going to lower costs, and I think we get what's going on here. But at the end of the day, our question is, how are we going to save our democracy? And part of it is got to be that we have got to deliver those lower costs for families. But the other part is we got to wash out this corruption.
I'm not trying to hold you to a purity test.
No, it's okay.
But I do want to know, because
Right.
I know where you come from.
Yep.
I know the jobs that you've had. I know the decade you spent in academia looking at bankruptcy. I know you going to Washington against your will in '95 in the Clinton administration.
Yep. I lost.
I know you lost. I know you fought him for a decade. I know that you went there in 2008 after everyone lost their goddamn home and they asked you, please, can you fix this? Please, can you hold the bankers accountable? I know all of this. I've read the books. I've read the statements. I've read the briefs. Taking that $14.6 million, did that pain you?
Oh, yeah. The hardest part for me about running for office, the single hardest part, is how much you don't want to disappoint people. When I first ran back in 2011, 2012, ran for Senate, I never run for anything before. And the part that was the hardest was actually not going out and raising money. I went out and people gave me $5 contributions online. I would go to house parties and people write checks for $25 and for whatever the maximum was back then, $1,000 or whatever.
I think up until that point, that Senate run was one of the most...
it was the most expensive in the country by a lot.
Right.
And I was up against a guy that was getting financed by Wall Street. So I saw the effect of money.
And most of your donors also were out of state, I believe.
That may be right in number. That may be right. And people would say to me, though, I've volunteered every Saturday. I've never volunteered on a campaign before. I had this woman come up to me. Remember, I started out way behind in this campaign. There were 7 other Democrats in the race. I'm down like 35 points the first time I'm polled. And I keep inching back. And it's late summer before the election in November, late summer, early fall. And I'm still behind. I'm not behind by a lot, but I'm behind. And this woman comes up through some selfie line. We're doing something. And she shakes hands and she says, Elizabeth, you're going to win. And I said, oh, thank you very much. This is what you're doing. You shake hands, go to the next person. She holds my hand a minute longer. She said, no, I know you're going to win. And I said, how do you know that? And she said, well, my friend Barbara and I decided a year ago when you got in this race that we were going to help you out in our town. And she names the town they're in. And she said, so we rearranged our work schedules and we went out 2 mornings a week in the traffic circle a few blocks from our house and held up signs for Elizabeth Warren. We painted the first ones. Later, we got your signs. And we never missed 2 days a week, week after week after week for a year. And I never met this woman. And she said, and the reason I know you're going to win is at first, people go around the circle and they look curious. Some people give us the finger, And she said, and then over time, more and more people would wave. And now people honk and wave and give us the good honk. And so this was kind of her version of how I know you're going to win. But to me, It was how much you have invested in helping me win. And I want to do everything I can. I wake up at 3 a.m. I do the best I can. I get up, I give the speeches, I do my homework. And the financing part of it, it's just a killer. I want a chance to let this campaign work. And yet our democracy can't survive if it's just going to be all about big money.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I can feel it pains you saying that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I didn't run for office because I wanted to be a senator. I had a great job. God, I love my job. I'm a teacher. It's what I was born to do. And I've done that since second grade, since Mrs. Lee gathered me into her ample bosom and whispered in my ear that I could be a teacher.
As a kid, you had a series of dolls that you would put in a row and
Teach.
And teach.
I did. You know, those dolls, I just want to say, we had some who always paid attention, but we had some bad boys in the back of the class. Boy, I'm telling you, that Sammy doll, his name was, I'm just saying.
What?
I'm just saying. His name was Sammy.
Are you getting back at me for bringing up the campaign finance?
If the shoe fits, what can I say?
My Lord, well, my name is Samuel, by the way, so you got that wrong.
No, this guy was Sammy. He and Susie.
I want to talk about, before you were a proud Democrat,
Mm-hmm.
you were a Republican, born and raised in Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
living on what you've described as the ragged edge of the middle class.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think your skepticism and condemnation of grifters like Donald Trump and Elon Musk comes from the fact that you were raised by parents whom just 3 years prior to your birth had their savings stolen by a business partner of your father?
Yep. You know, my mother and daddy, my 3 older brothers were kind of the first family. I was what was always called the surprise later on. I was a lot older before I understood what that really meant. But before...
That's to save the marriage child.
No, this was I think something else went wrong.
What does that mean?
They were surprised. The
no protection child.
I don't ask further. But they had saved their money up. And they tried this little auto business.
That's right.
In a little town in Oklahoma. And Daddy was the one in the back who did all the car repairs.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had this partner out front who was the one who would sell the cars and bring in the customers and so on. And ultimately, this guy ran off with all the money, left Daddy with the debts. And it just kind of broke my parents. You know, they'd made it through the Depression. They'd made it through World War II. They had these 3 rambunctious boys who did all kinds of crazy things.
On the heels of the Dust Bowl.
That's right. All on the heels of the Dust Bowl. But they were a family. And I grew up in the shadow of what it's like after it's broken. And for a kid, kids are smart. Kids smell it in the air. And you can smell what it's like when somebody has been cheated, when they no longer really believe that if you work hard and play by the rules, it's all going to work out okay.
And you felt that?
Yeah. And I've always felt like it's the part of America that is special. That we are a country that the secular religion is work hard, play by the rules.
Mm.
You can do this. And yet, what really makes a huge difference is what are the rules of this game?
Mm-hmm.
What's the board set up like? And there's a period in American history where it's set up to let America's middle class grow and succeed. It's not perfect. We don't get there all the way in all the ways we should, but it's headed in that direction. It's basically post-World War II up till Ronald Reagan gets elected in the 80s. And then this shift starts to take place, and it increasingly hollows out that solid middle class, and money moves to the top. And the billionaires start to take increasing control. You see a lot more concentration in industries. And for me to experience this kind of in a very personal way is here I am, I'm teaching bankruptcy law, I'm teaching about families that go broke and how they try to renew themselves by getting rid of their debts. But I'm living in a country that has said to Wall Street, hey, listen, you want to cheat a bunch of families across this country? Have at it, boys. And that's exactly what they were doing. And they load a lot of risk into our economy. And I'm out there like waving every red flag and flashing light saying, they're going to bring down our economy. And when they do that, they're going to bring down millions of families. And sure enough, that is exactly what happened in 2008.
But before that happens, in 1978, Congress passes a law to allow people and companies to declare bankruptcy.
Bankruptcy Reform Act.
Yeah.
Yep.
With a lot more ease. And come 1982, when you're a professor and a mother of two, and you decide to embark on a fact-finding mission to, quote, prove these people filing for bankruptcy were a bunch of cheaters and taking advantage of the rest of us.
Yep.
As you and your colleagues travel across the courthouses around the country with a portable Xerox machine called R2-D2 because there were no electronic records, what did you find in the data of these bankruptcy cases? Did you find the cheaters?
No. They were the families like my family. My family never declared bankruptcy, so I was sure that we were different from the families who were in bankruptcy. The families in bankruptcy surely were the cheaters.
And how did you think they were different? What was the distance
They were the
between
cheaters. They were the ones who were layabouts, or they were ones who had gotten their money
weak-willed.
Weak-willed. I guess in some sense I thought they deserve to be broke. And I'm going to go expose these people. Shame on the laws for being so much more generous.
Does sound like a
people.
Republican, by the way.
Oh, it did. It did. It sounded very Republican. And I sat in those courtrooms, I read those files, and I realized this family's just like mine. Those families had had one of three things happen to them, and most had had two out of three. They had terrible medical problems. They had a significant, long job loss, or they had a death or divorce in the family. And that explained more than 90% of the bankruptcies. And like I said, many had had two. How long people had struggled to try to stay out of bankruptcy court, how they had borrowed from Peter to pay Paul, how they'd sold wedding rings, how they'd done everything they could not to have to go into court and declare themselves losers, dead flat broke, people who couldn't make it in America's economic system. And I came to understand, it's how I got into how the economy worked, that these were also people who were increasingly tricked and trapped into just crappy financial products. These were people who, when things had been a little better, had bought a home. And over time, what happens to these people? Somebody knocks on the door and says, you need a new roof, you need gutters, you need new wiring. How about we refinance your home and we can lower your payments? And never disclose that when you sign on the bottom line, you have just agreed that you're going to have about a 1 in 5 chance of losing the home that you live in and that you've successfully been paying for.
Which brings us to 2008.
Yeah. That's the whole how we kept loading up this risk. We basically turned loose a handful of smart money boys off Wall Street to just go out there and like a plague of locusts on American families and just pick as many pockets as they could. And then they so cleverly took those mortgages and bundled them up and figured out how to make millions and millions and millions of dollars off those families.
You said a problem that looks real but small and at the margins in the 1980s has moved to the center by the 1990s.
Yep.
And by the 2000s, it's starting to hollow out America's middle class. Yep. Come 2008, 2009, when you're asked to come to Washington and to hold these banks accountable, you said that studying the Treasury's practices taught you that Obama's economic advisors were even more beholden to the banks than you understood.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that gap between what you thought the Obama administration was interested in and what they proved to be interested in.
So remember, let me just do a little more setting of the table.
Please.
Literally.
It's so great to have a senator here to help podcast with me.
Oh, no, I love this. But millions of families have either lost their homes or are in the process of losing their homes.
Mm-hmm.
I came to Washington to set up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but also there to make the argument for how we can save as many families as possible, how we can be the lifeboats in the water. And we won't be able to save them all. Some are already gone. But we can pull a lot more families into the lifeboats because that's how I look at the economy at that point. We are in a crash. We're in a terrible recession. Let's save as many families as we can. I make my pitch to Tim Geithner, who then was Secretary of the Treasury, and he listens and he says to me, no, we've run the numbers and we don't have to do that. The banks are going to survive. And I was like, wait a minute. I get it. He said, we've foamed the runway, was his view. We've foamed the runway enough that the banks will survive. So from his perspective, you want to save an economy, you save a half dozen Wall Street banks. You pump as much money as you need to in there. You foam the runway so they can land successfully and get this bad debt off their books and move right back to profitability. My view was the way you save an economy is you save the families that are dying out there financially. And Tim Geithner won and I lost.
At the time, when you were constructing the CFPB, Warren Buffett said, I think Elizabeth would do better if she were less angry and demonized less.
Yeah. Fine. I just don't care. It was a damn good idea. And you know how I know that? Because this is one we actually won on. We actually got it turned into law. And here's the deal. In roughly a dozen years of operation, it has uncovered about $21 billion in fraud. And it didn't just uncover it and say, oh, fraud. It actually made those fraudsters return the money directly to the people who got cheated.
Roughly around $18 billion.
There we go.
Right.
That is a big win.
Huge win.
Huge win. And you know how else it's a win? It shows you actually can make government work. Government doesn't have to just work for Wall Street banks or billionaires. We can make it work for everybody else.
But I do believe that it would have done more good if you were the one hired to run it. Now hold on. July of 2011, President Obama brings you into the Oval Office.
Yeah.
You guys walk out on a hot summer day.
Damn, it was hot.
What is that conversation between the two of you?
So I have spent a year now setting up the agency, and it's time to give the agency its permanent head.
Right.
But that's going to be someone who has to be confirmed by Congress. And, I want that job. Damn, I want that job. Because I love this agency. And because I've built this agency now for a year, I've taken it from nobody, literally, to we're at almost 1,000 people and we've got all the pieces and it's working and we're screwing it together. I mean, it's like a construction site to do a lot of good. So the president says to me, the Republicans will never confirm you. They actually had sent a letter to the president with all that's happened since then, you can laugh about it. But at the time, it was just remarkable. They sent him a letter because they were in the majority in the Senate. And they said, if you name that woman, we will never confirm her, which means the CFPB can't actually legally get started because it won't have a a confirmed head, and it was time to do that. We were bearing down on that time. So the president said, I'm not going to nominate you. I'm not going to have that fight. And, you know me. I'm like, let's fight. Let's fight. Come on, let's fight. Let's lace up the boxing. Let's go punch him in the nose. Let's do this.
And you tell President Obama what?
I tell him this is what I want to do.
And he says?
And he says no. And he says, but go back to Massachusetts and beat the Republican who's in the Senate. He's coming up next year, 2012.
Which I know you do, but hold on, Senator. I don't want to discount the lived experience that you had.
Yeah.
And I read that one of your advisors said that day he saw you walk out of the office with tears in your eyes.
Yeah.
Why did that hurt so much?
I saw how much good we could do, how this was so much the right vehicle to do the good. And I wanted him to believe in it.
And why didn't he?
He had a lot of other things. Look, I want to say the other half. We wouldn't have had a consumer agency if it hadn't been for Barack Obama. There were fights in the room when Larry Summers and Tim Geithner would say they were doing what became Dodd-Frank. Well, we can get X that we want if only we will agree to throw this stupid consumer agency overboard. How about we do that? And it was Barack Obama who said, nope, I'm not getting out of here without getting the consumer agency. We're gonna make this thing happen. But I wasn't going to be the person to run it. And it wasn't that nobody else could run it. It was just, I could just feel it. It was just, I could so do this. Please, let's fight and let me do this. But the answer was no. The part of the sin of 2008 was that the bailout was all about the guys at the top and not about the 10 million families that lost their homes, the millions of people who lost their jobs, the millions of people who lost their savings. It was the further hollowing out of America's middle class and the strengthening of America's handful of billionaires.
You came to prominence in part because of how you dealt with those billionaires on C-SPAN. You interrogated and attacked J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon.
Yep.
How much, in fact, did J.P. Morgan collect in overdraft fees from their customers in 2020? Do you know the number?
I don't know the number in front of me, but
I actually have the number in front of me. It's $1.463 billion. That's nearly $1.5 billion that you collected from your customers. Now, do you know how much JP Morgan's profit would have been in 2020 if you had followed the recommendation of the regulators and waived overdraft fees to help struggling consumers? The answer is your profits would have been $27.6 billion. I did the math for you. So here's the thing. You and your colleagues come in today to talk about how you stepped up and took care of customers during the pandemic, and it's a bunch of baloney.
John Stumpf?
Yep.
From Wells Fargo?
Yep, he deserved it. Do you know how much money, how much value your stock holdings in Wells Fargo gained while this scam was underway?
Well, first of all, it was not a scam. And cross-sell is a way of deepening relationships. When customers
We've been through this, Mr. Stumpf. I asked you a very simple question. Do you know how much the value of your stock went up while this scam was going on?
It's all of my compensation is in our public
filing. Do you know how much it was?
It's all in the public filing.
Oh, you're right. It is all in the public records because I looked it up. While this scam was going on, you personally held an average of 6.75 million shares of Wells stock.
The list goes on and on.
Yeah.
And when this would happen, these clips would go viral on social media.
Yeah.
And the articles would come out and they would say, Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren eviscerates X person, destroys X person. But then, as I was walking around this morning, 2025, I thought almost everyone that you eviscerated, their bank accounts were not eviscerated.
No.
Their professional duties were not destroyed.
Right.
Their status, place, and lot in life were not affected by the viral clips.
Right. They didn't get drummed out of the racket club.
No. So I want to know, now that you've been in this for 12 years, do you think public shaming, which is what you did, and God bless you for doing it, but do you think public shaming is an effective tool to create change? Do you think it produces what you want? Does it produce the outcomes you want?
All by itself, no. But I will offer two thoughts on it. The first one is, it is a part of how you make change. Look, the Democrats in Congress who were there when I was doing this, who were there in 2013, 2014, our Democratic Party is different now from the one a little over 10 years ago. There are a lot more people who are willing to stand up and fight back. Is it everybody? Are they fighting as hard as I want them to? No, but there is change. And part of why there is change is because I went after John Stumpf and what he'd done with Wells Fargo, and people responded. It's not just that I did it. It's that you did it, Sam. You and a whole lot of other people who were in college clipped that and sent it around. I'm serious. Yeah. It changes who we are and what we fight for. So that's part of what's changed. But
And
the
the
other
other part?
part of Donald Trump, good golly, Miss Molly. I mean, we got somebody here. Okay, I did grow up in Oklahoma. We got somebody here for whom there is no shame. Convicted felon. For most people, that would have been enough to say, you know, I'm retiring from the public scene. Over and over and over. A man who just brazens it out and has taught others to brazen it out. So I want to say it's both things that have changed. Am I sorry I did it? Not at all. And if you gave me a chance, what would I do? I'd do it more.
You know, when Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, you gave a speech soon after, and you said, what this election proves is that the American people want change.
Yes.
It was clear in the Democratic primaries. It was clear in the Republican primaries. It was clear in the campaign. And it was clear on Election Day. The final results may have divided us, but the entire electorate embraced deep, fundamental reform of our economic system and our political system.
By the way, all polling in 2014 and 2015 said the same thing.
Yes.
They said, we don't really want Hillary Clinton. Some people actually even said, we kind of want Senator Warren. The Democratic Party went with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
2023, after the midterms, the Democratic Party says, look at this. Look at how we outperformed. This is a referendum on Trump. This is actually an indication that people want Joe Biden. They made a connection that is not true, grounded in no reality. Now, 2 times, in 2016 and 2024, both of the times we lost, the Democratic Party has opted not to change. Now, we switched to Kamala Harris, obviously, but that was about 6 months too late. Why is the Democratic Party so slow to pivot? We have so many talented people. Why can we not get past our past?
So I want to give an answer to a different question.
Of course you do. It's because I asked the question.
Of course.
You love to reframe every question.
I do. It's one of my superpowers.
You love to do this, but I'm asking you to answer my question because we don't have that much time left.
I know, and I'm going to run out the clock here.
I'll walk out.
Okay. I don't want to, for me, this isn't about looking backwards because it just isn't helpful unless what we're answering is, are we going to do any better going forward? Have we learned a damn thing?
No, that was my next question.
Okay, good. So I'm just right there with you on that question.
Okay.
And that is, we're learning, but slowly.
Okay. Do you regret saying that President Biden had a mental acuity? He had a sharpness to him. You said that up until July of last year.
I said what I believe to be true.
And you think he was as sharp as you?
I said I had not seen decline. And I hadn't at that point.
You did not see any decline from 2024 Joe Biden to 2021 Joe Biden?
Not when I said that. You know, the thing is, he was sharp. He was on his feet. I saw him. Live event. I had meetings with him a couple of times.
Senator, on his feet is not praise. He can speak in sentences is not praise.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Look, the question is, what are we going to do now?
Okay.
And what we're going to do now is we got 47 of us in the Senate, and we are pulling ourselves together because it increases our power. We don't have as much power as we want, but we don't have no power. And we got to use all of our tools in the toolbox to do as much as we humanly possibly can. This is now for all the marbles, Sam. And I get it. We could go back.
Last time was for all the marbles, I thought.
I get it.
In 2020, it was the soul of the nation.
I understand.
How many times is it going to be for all the marbles? Can we just have a normal election?
I'd love that.
How many marbles are there?
We got a guy right now who is saying that he's flirting with not obeying lawful court orders. But what he's doing is like a whole nother level of threat to the survival of our democracy and more of the...
I'm not trying to make light of that.
I know you're not. And what I'm trying to do is say, God dang, we can spend our time looking backwards and saying, you know what parts we didn't get right? Fine. And I'll stipulate. You can have it. But the question is, what are we going to do now? What tools have we got? How much can we herd our Democrats together? And how much can we get real power in this moment by getting people across the country to weigh in on their Social Security cuts, weigh in on the Department of Education cuts, weigh in on the healthcare cuts?
I agree. Let's talk about what we want to do.
Okay.
The future of the Democratic Party. Where do you see it going? Do you think it is moving towards abandoning social issues?
No.
Of talking less about race and gender inequality?
No.
Okay. One prominent Democrat, Rahm Emanuel, former Obama chief of staff, has been positioning himself to push back hard against Trumpism. He's called the Democratic brand toxic, weak, and woke.
Thanks, Rahm.
Wrong?
We need to do what Donald Trump promised to do. We need to make the economic case. That is our job right now. We are fighting for the things that hardworking middle-class families need, like healthcare and Social Security and public education. We need to get out there and do something really radical. Tell the damn truth.
We've been telling the truth.
No,
you haven't been telling the truth.
We need to do it louder. I'm saying all Democrats need to tell this more aggressively, more loudly. That's a part of what we need to do going forward.
You don't believe you've been telling the truth loudly every single day since you've been in office? People will say, as I was going to talk to you, they said, where are the Democrats? Well, it's actually amazing. If you look at the Democrats and their social media pages, including yours, including Bernie Sanders, including AOC, whoever you want to go down, you guys actually are all saying something.
Yes.
It's just that it's not reaching the people that you need to reach. You have said Republicans do messaging, Democrats do substance. And I ask you, if a tree falls in a forest, what do we do to grab back attention? Because right now we are not doing that.
Fair enough. But let me just push back a little bit on this.
Of course you're going to push back.
Of course I am.
You're you.
let me just start out with the fact that Democrats all over this country are holding town halls. And why is that notable? Because Republicans can't hold town halls. Whatever else you want to say about Democrats, and you can say it, I get it. Much of it is well-deserved. But we are not getting chased off stage and running down hallways and hiding our faces from our constituents. We are not told by our leadership, the way the Republicans are, don't go out and meet with your leaders with your constituents, with your voters, because they are so damned angry about what you're doing and they hate what you're doing so much that it will create a lot of bad video of you running away from the very people who elected you. So I get it.
I hear you on that.
Democrats are not doing great, but at least we can get out there and stand in front of a crowd and not be chased off stage.
Do you ever worry that the Democratic Party, when we look back on this time, do you ever worry that the Democratic Party will be seen as being on the right side of history without having made much of it?
I worry every day that we know what is right, that we fight with good hearts, and that it might not be enough. All I've got is my heart and my 24 hours a day, and as many people as I can bring into this. In a democracy, it's not just one person. It's all of us. We got to fight for this. And we got to fight. We got to fight for ourselves. We got to fight for our families. We've got to fight for the people who are going to lose so much if we don't beat this back. What Donald Trump and Elon Musk and his golden chainsaw are trying to do.
Who are coming after the CFPB as we speak.
Yes, they are. They're just trying to target on everybody who's got a credit card or a checking account or a Venmo account, just basically saying, we can cheat you guys. Do you know they put out something the other day and said they're not going to prosecute white-collar crime? It's like, oh, so if some guy grabs your purse out on the street, man, have the police go after him and lock him up. But if some executive figures out how to suck money out of your checking account so you can't figure it out, basically they get to keep the money. That's the kind of country we want to be. So, yeah, it's a big fight.
What chokes you up when you're saying that? What's the image that comes to mind that produces all of that in you?
It's the little kids I taught.
In New Jersey?
In New Jersey. I was 21, straight out of college. Back then, those little kids didn't get to be in the regular classrooms. They had to be kept in a special room, walled off by itself.
They were often very scary, sad rooms.
Yep.
My dad talks about them all the time.
And as a country, later, we put money in and laws. And we said, public education is about creating opportunity for every single child. That's what we're going to do. And we've done that. And there have been so many kids who've built out who they are. Kids now who can live independently because they had that opportunity. Kids who've gone on to school. Kids who work. Kids who do things. Kids who make the most of themselves. Kids whose families are really proud of them. And Donald Trump and Elon Musk want to take that back so that they could help finance some tax cuts for a handful of billionaires. I think about those kids who are going to get left behind if we don't fight back and fight for them.
Part of the features, the animating characteristics of authoritarians
Mm-hmm.
is they demonize people like me,
Mm-hmm.
the press, and they demonize their political enemies. Just this week,
Mm-hmm.
there was an arson attempt at Governor Shapiro's home.
Mm-hmm.
Do you fear that? Do you fear retribution?
I just really work hard not to give that space in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
I just really work hard on that. I don't want to, because
You don't want to because you think it's likely?
I don't want to because of how it undermines what I need to do. Look, what I do every day is an act of optimism.
Right.
Running for office is an act of optimism. It is a
a leap of
fundamental
faith.
belief. It's a leap of faith.
Right.
And for me, if I get out there and talk about these good ideas and I talk about who's going to be affected and I tell you the pieces, I believe that you and I together are going to build something better.
But those threats don't scare you.
I'm just not going to give them space in my brain. I will not. Any more than I'm going to give space in my brain to all the nasty things that that these guys say about me and say about parts of my body and say about my voice and say about everything I do. I'm just, you know what? I can't change it. I'm not going to give these guys the satisfaction of thinking they took up a little rental space in my brain. Nope. Sorry, guys.
The kids would say, they're trying to live rent-free in your head.
Yeah, and you
you're
know
not.
what? That's actually a very insightful way to think about the world.
As of right now, the deportation of Kilmar, my last question for you. In 2011, maybe July 31st, I think it was your last day
Oh, yeah.
at the CFPB. And you wrote an email to your staff saying, goodbye, this is my last day. And I have it here, and I thought maybe you'd want to read it for our listeners.
I haven't looked at this since July 31st, 2011. Team, today is my last day at the Bureau. I leave this agency, but not this fight. The issues we deal with, a middle class that has been squeezed and business models built on tricks and traps, are deeply personal to me, and they always will be. I will cheer you as you open a new chapter in our ongoing push for a strong and independent CFPB. You can realize the vision of a 21st century government that holds lawbreakers accountable and that enforces basic rules that make markets work honestly. An honest market will give companies that provide fair value to their customers a chance to flourish, free from competition with cheaters. And an honest market will give American families better information, better prices, and better products, and a chance to achieve real economic security. Now, it is up to you, and I couldn't be more hopeful about what lies ahead. Lisbeth. Yeah.
In 2025,
Yeah.
do you believe that is possible, what you said? Like, when Biden won in 2020, you went on the Ezra Klein show, and you said, right now, as the Democrats control the House and the Senate, we have our toes on the starting line of big structural change. What you are talking about here. The door that is so often slammed tight and locked for big change is open. Not wide open, but it's open an inch or two. In 2025, that door seems to be closed and shut pretty firmly. How do we go about opening it up again? Do you think we can? Do you think we will?
Yeah, I do think we can. And here's why. When I wrote that goodbye memo, I said, I believe in what you can do, but they hadn't done it yet.
Right.
They've had a dozen years. And you know what? Damn, they went out and did it. They went out and actually helped 203 million Americans. They kept count of who got helped directly from the work they did. We did the proof of concept. The part we got to fight now, and this is hard, the part we got to fight is the public political part of this fight. And I get it. I wish I were better at this. I wish our team was better at this. But we start from the fact that we are on the right side. And we start from the fact that there are a whole lot of people who are in this fight with us. Nobody is in this alone. We come to it with different skills. We come to it with different motivations, why we move at this moment. But I truly believe there are enough of us who are willing to fight hard enough that Donald Trump and Elon Musk will not be the final chapter in our democracy.
And will you be the next chapter in 2028? Would you run again?
I'm not running. I'm here to pull as many people into this fight as I can. This is a moment, Sam, that's about where power truly lies in this country. Yeah, I do Constitutional Law 101 all the time. But all of it is underpinned by millions of people across this country who either decide that, I just got to cover up my head with a blanket, or who say, I'm in this fight and I will get in this fight. I will turn out. I will show up at those Republican non-town halls, and I will make my voice clear, because we do have our toes on the line again. Yeah, those guys have got a lot. I get it. They've got control of they got control of what looks like everything at this point. But handful of Republicans in Congress shift over to the other side, we got a lot of what we need. We can put a stop to what Donald Trump is doing. Donald Trump is not impervious to people who push back. He is not impervious to noise. Elon Musk can be peeled off from the Trump administration. We've got places, and they are vulnerable because they are doing shit that people don't like. In this country, that is a time when people can say, we've had enough.
Donald Trump and Elon Musk, they are not our last chapter, you said.
No.
Well, I hope you are right. And I want to thank you for pulling me into the fight all those many years ago, and for sitting here with me. It has been a tremendous honor. So,
Oh, thank you, Sam.
Senator Warren, thank you.
Thank you, sweetie.